Our first keynote speaker was on a quest to organize India's transportation and accommodation industries, and ultimately founded the country's largest online travel group. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the founder and CEO of Ibibo Group, Ashish Kashyap.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And for those of you who are not from India, welcome to India, and hope you enjoy the chicken curry. So I just want to, before talking about how did we basically build the accommodation market in India, I just want to rewind 5 years ago, where we were actually not even supposed to be building this business. But 5 years ago, if you go back, this was a hugely cluttered online travel aggregator market. There were multiple, and a lot of these brands were a lot of air-focused. I think 90% of their business was being driven by air ticketing. And if you really think about the air ticketing business, it continues to be pretty interesting, but there was always lack of fragmentation, and there were always these episodes and incidents happening where an airline could go underground. And with all of this happening, and with such large, well-funded players that you see on the screen, we were daring enough to give birth to Go Ibibo 5 to 6 years ago. And while we thought of a lot of gaps which were there in the market at that time, a lot of people actually thought, and some of my current industry colleagues thought, that I've lost my marbles, right, by trying to come into the market. But the way I thought about at that time was that, look, there are significant gaps. I'm trying to book a air ticket, and I'm trying to now cancel it. I have to wait 21 days to 2 months to get my refund back. And that was like really painful for me as an individual traveler who would travel across the country for various use cases. At the same time, I would see reliability issues. I would be at the checkout, all excited to take my trip to Goa, ready to pay, and while I'm making the payment, the fare jumps. So from $100, it's gone and jumped to $150. And then I get a call from a customer service executive, sir, you have to pay that $50 US. And that was like really, really irritating, for me as a traveler. And similarly, there were like lots of significant issues. So against all what the industry said, we, and a couple of my colleagues who are here, we were daring enough to say, yes, why don't we solve these problems? But there was one very, very significant problem out there which was completely unsolved, which was this, and I'm going to keep this few slides focused on accommodation because that's the context, this virgin fragmented accommodation market, which was there, out there, which was not touched at all. There were lots of these properties listed online, but the hotel owner didn't even know he's listed, almost like a directory listing. And when we thought of this, we said, wow, this is really exciting, but challenging, right? And we said, if we could try and bring this market online, it could be really valuable for actually both sides of the equation, both the hotel owners, accommodation owners, on the other side, the travelers. And what was unique about this market, this is like outside of the Tajes and the Oberois and the IGs of the world, right? This is like those hundreds of thousands of small units. Typically, if you look at the structure, it's run by a mom and pop kind of a scenario. It's like the son, the underlying property underneath each of these are forefathers, so which means actual economics or unit economics don't hold good. This guy wants to continue to do this business, and that's how he wants to build his bread and butter. But we said, look, this is going to be challenging because it's not dealing with corporations, it's going to be dealing with micro entrepreneurs across the country. The other interesting thing we saw was that there's hugely low occupancy rate. Right? So we could decipher that from two angles, right? One angle could be low occupancy rates means low demand, or the other way we could have looked at it from an opportunity prism. We actually looked at it from an opportunity prism, and we said, we go to Europe and US, we see, wow, the occupancy rates are 70% plus. In fact, I was in Amsterdam last week, and I was walking on this road, and there are lots of these independent hotels next to one of the canals, and it says, we are sold out till next year, right? So, that's the kind of occupancy rates that exist in markets like Europe and many other markets that a lot of people have followed. But in a market like India, we saw occupancy rates are as low as 40%. So actually, we thought that these hotel owners are crying to do business. And So that was a second interesting thing we saw. But while we got excited as a team and we said, hey, we're going to take this next challenge, right? We're going to build this. We said that there are significant problems, guys. This is not about basically trying to bring mobile phones online or mobile phone sellers online. This is not a commodity like selling a mobile phone or a commodity like selling shoes, right? This is too subjective, and there are significant problems. And we started deciphering the problems. And personally, in the quest to really decipher these problems, we personally started booking. So I remember making 5 bookings a couple of years ago, and I land into this place called Manali. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this. It's up north. It's a big drive from here, so it's a 12-hour drive, and I land at the hotel with a booking voucher. I don't want to name where I booked it from. And the hotel owner kicked me out, said, sorry, there is no valid booking. I said, wow, this, and I had to obviously find a space, right? You can't expect me to now drive back to Delhi 12 hours. So that was like, we said, this is a significant problem, right? I suddenly started actually getting demoralized. I said, hey, this is tough, right? Because this guy's like kicking me out, right? After a 12-hour drive, right? Of course, I stopped by in Chandigarh in the middle, right? And some of my colleagues, while they were doing this research, faced the same issue, right? So it was not just one-off. It was like, this was, repeatedly happening. And I said, like, this is never going to happen, right? This is never going to take off. So that was number one problem, right? Getting kicked out, right? Then in another instance, and this is the time when we are learning by doing and learning by testing. In another instance, I'm checking into a hotel. And again, I'm going back 4 years. I'm checking into a hotel. I've landed into Bangalore. And the hotel owner says that, okay, listen, you have to go 2 kilometers away to another property. So, but you have to organize your own transport. I can't pay for it. So with my bags, I get into a cab and drive down 2 kilometers. And, it was a horrible experience, right? I said, look, I would have been better off just calling this guy directly. So another example of, the challenge that we were supposed to kind of overcome. Then the third challenge, right? You go to the website, you see this beautiful picture with this nice towel-shaped swan on the bed, right? I'm sure you've seen this, right? And then you check in, and to your horror, you see the plaster of the wall coming down. The bed is almost broken. I could have put uglier pictures, by the way. I wanted that the day goes pretty pleasant for you. So that was another, interesting one that, I'm not getting what I see, which means that there is really no trust. A very frequent one. I booked an AC room, and I booked a room with the breakfast, but what I get is a room with a fan, so which means I'm sweating. Again, something which would really break the trust between the two sides of the equation. A beautiful swimming pool, and suddenly you see a very interesting swimming pool, right? So again, an issue of the trust. So what was the nucleus of the problem, right? When we started looking at this, we said, how do we solve this, right? What's the nucleus? The big nucleus of this problem was that the hotel owner, while he's listed, while the demand is online, while he's listed online, he's actually not online. He's still using registers like this. And typically, the hotel owner will have this little boy who's perhaps new literate or illiterate totally. So he wouldn't even know how to, use computers or English language interfaces. So that's also a challenge. But, this is largely the case. The guy is unknowingly online. And we said, that's really the problem. We have to somehow firstly get this guy online. It's just almost like Facebook. If I have to derive value out of Facebook, I have to be online and my friends have to be online, right? So we said we need to first solve this basic problem, even before we start buying in AdWords on Google saying, book a hotel in Manali or Goa or wherever. And with that, obviously with all of these problems, the biggest issue was that this business never had taken off because it was always a negative loop, which means there was consumer demand because there was critical mass of air ticketing being purchased online, but there was unreliable fulfillment. So you saw what all happened to you and me. You saw I getting kicked out. You saw that beautiful swimming pool. You saw, you got what you didn't see kind of a thing. And hence that basically that unreliable fulfillment led to a lower consumer demand, which further led to lower motivations from hoteliers, which further led to no feedback loops happening between the two sides, which basically was a negative loop, and which was a market which would never have taken off. So what did we do to solve these problems, at a very basic level, right? So first, we said that, look, let's, come what may, bring this guy online, but if you tell this guy that you have to be online, he won't be online. So we said, how do we build that positive paranoia amongst this hotel owner to use the system online? So we use this whole thing, what we call internally as the competition effect. And competition effect not between him and a hotel which is 10 kilometers away, between hotels in hyperlocation. So Mr. Hotel, you're ranked 82, you're going to lose 5 lakh rupees. And that positive paranoia started getting him pushed to start using the platform every day. We would obviously, besides that data that we shared, how does he rank, we started sharing with him what are the key attributes like service quality, amenities. We started encouraging him to start responding to ratings and reviews. But this competition pressure got him to start using the system every day, because if he wouldn't have used that, 82 would become 100. We started, of course, giving him lots of simple analytical tools like how can he improve himself, right? What is his content score versus his neighboring competing hotels? What is his pricing level? How should he price himself to basically increase the yields? And we obviously started in a very simplistic manner, but as we went along, we started giving him more and more data, which essentially empowered him to do better and better. This was a very, very hard task, and this was actually done in conjunction with a very large on-the-ground team to educate every hotelier in the nook and corner of the city. The other thing that we realized is that it's really important for us to use the power of crowd. So as we got the phase 1 traction going, we said, now we have users, let's use the power of community to get the feedback loop going back into the hotel owners and get them to start sharing real pictures. So we had real people, and by the way, our conversion rates to generation of content, what we hear is twice an average conversion rate of any ratings and review UGC kind of a system. So we said, let's not solve this problem using text reviews, but solve these problems using real pictures. So that was the other thing that we did, which not only solved the problems for travelers, but also it gave real-time feedback into the hotel owners while the person had just checked in. So a person checks in and sees that this bed is broken. He would take a picture, upload, and then the hotel owner would actually get a notification that there's something wrong in room number 13. Solve the problem. So that's an example, right? So you would get some beautiful pictures, and you would also get a beautiful bathroom, but actually the bathroom looks like that, right? So and that's really been shared by a real user out there on the system, right? The other thing that we recently launched, we said, there is a lot of information which Google can't solve, dynamic information. I want to go from place A to place B. What would be the condition of roads? So we launched question and answers, and and to our surprise, the volume of real travelers started responding over the last couple of weeks has been astounding totally. And we've seen questions right from recommendation of hotels to questions like, if I have to go from here to, let's say, Corbett, which route do I take? What is the condition of the route right now? And those kind of answers when they come in, which further builds and strengthens network effects. We took this to the next level by actually involving hotels also to start participating, and again, another way for us to build the two-sided system. So this is a slide on how we build the feedback loops and how the hotels are basically responding on one hand to questions and responding to real-time ratings and reviews. And then, of course, as we build traction, we realized that people are searching across the country, and we basically built parallel to all of this. Then we built a very large selection along with this technology. We have about 45,000 hotels. And as you can see, a lot of hotels are asking them to be rated on our platform, because if people rate them, then they get better ranked, and then they get advantage, and that competition effect starts playing out. Okay, so technology. Okay, so essentially what this led to really was a very strong two-sided network effect, the classic network effect that we were trying to build, which helped us to strengthen this whole platform. And of course, this didn't happen overnight. It took a period of time, which was really about building bigger community, which would give more feedback looping into the supply, which would basically enable and give paranoia into the supply to give better fulfillment and reliable fulfillment, which in turn will drive more demand. So I think accommodation opportunity, though, is a challenging opportunity in the country. Douglas talked a little about it, but super exciting. My belief is that there are 5 million rooms out there in the market. The occupancy rates are below any average, 40 to 55%. I think there's huge opportunity to take the occupancy rates to 70%. Our data tells us that in the last year or so, the occupancy rates have actually increased because of online by 10 to 15%. And volume of travelers are growing at 25%. Of course, for us, it's a triple-digit percentage growth. But all of these point to a very exciting opportunity. So if anyone is interested to work with us on this opportunity, partner with us, please feel free to get in touch. We feel that India is the next frontier for online travel, and super excited to be working and creating this marketplace. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashish. Ladies and gentlemen, to lead our question and answer, please welcome to the stage our two talkbackers. The head of leisure and online travel from Amadeus, Sebastien Gibergues. And the co-founder and CEO of Yatra, Dhruv Shringi. Gentlemen, it's all yours.
Dhruv, how are you doing?
Sorry, I think we've been instructed to jump right into it, Ashish. That was some impressive growth, great numbers that you showed. If you look at the skeptics in the market, and I think there are more than a few skeptics out here in this market, the word from the skeptics would be that growth is on the back of huge losses, right? Some $60 million last year, $100 million of losses this year. How long do you see this trend continuing? And what are some of the other metrics which are giving you the belief to invest so strongly behind this market?
Yeah, I think all good questions, right? So I think
Could we, you know what, we had a little mic problem, so I know it's a long question. Could we repeat the question real quickly, because some in the back didn't get it? Thank you.
Sure. So the question was that the skeptics out there would say that a large part of the growth which Ibibo has seen is on the back of deep discounting and huge losses, some 60 million of losses last year, $100 million of losses this year. Now, the question is that if this was not the case, right, what would happen? Would the same growth rate continue? And also, what are some of the other KPIs that you would have seen which have given you the confidence to invest so aggressively behind this market?
Yeah. So I think some of the KPIs, so firstly, let's just take a step back, right? So, we built this business at a time when a lot of platforms were not working towards building this particular category. It's a hard category. I think the prize is really big. And the prize is big because of the huge fragmentation and also given the low occupancy rates, very high intention from the supply to actually play a share in providing incentives to the consumer. In fact, and that's really a lot of it is changing. When you come on your question on KPIs, for us, it's really the volume of travelers repeating their behavior, essentially. The yield for the supply, basically, and also the occupancy rates. So the way we look at the scenario is that it's not actually a demand side problem. Why is it an expensive market to build? Because it's a supply side problem. And because it's a supply side problem, it's a combination of putting technology, BI, analytics, people, and marketing behind this. Sure. So it's a combination of all of these, right? And today's date, I'm pretty hands-on, and I go and do roadshows with hotels. And unlike a lot of supply side which say, hey, my core business is getting cannibalized, and what's happening here, for the hotels, we are a drug now. And they're saying, for me, it's not about selling a room. It's about what's my profitability per day. Out of the X number of rooms that I have, how much of it is getting covered and what do I make at the bottom line, right? And at the end of the day, if we can move that 45% to 75%, there is obviously that journey of education which will happen, which is, I think, going to be expensive. I think then, the task is done.
But if you look at the overall market, right, the market itself is not growing at that pace. That means there is a high degree of cannibalization which is happening. And to your point, when you go actually and talk to hotels, today a hotel will ask you if you want a discount to just open one of the apps and book in his lobby using the app and get the discount. A lot of the savvy hotels actually are just increasing their ARR because they know that, some of us will be discounting it, so customer gets the benefit of it.
Yeah, so
if this drug, wasn't there, do you think the growth rate will continue the way it has?
Yeah, absolutely, because, we've constantly tested, right, in areas where we've hit thresholds.
Right.
When we basically move to profitable unit economics, we absolutely see it, right? But you have to hit those thresholds. You cannot see. Today's date, you have a similar market is being created in the city taxi service, right? Uber, Ola, and that's hard, right? Fragmented drivers, education, etc. And we've seen people are paying during surge pricing, right? So my sense is this, that again, I just want to repeat, it's not a demand side problem. Demand would be willing to pay 300. See, the minute the demand pays 300 rupees extra, you're solving the unit economics problem. It is really a supply side problem which has to be solved with technology.
But what about the sustainability of building that marketplace, right? Because that clearly comes at a cost and impacts, and it's quite disruptive for all of the players. Do you see an end to this building phase of this marketplace?
I think, so I cannot share what our numerical thresholds are when you turn, which hyperlocations do you turn positive. It's we're very, very data driven, so as a company, with today's date, can change unit economics within 45 minutes, right, basically. But it's really important for us to hit those, what I call as those network effect thresholds, which is really, really critical, because if you don't hit those thresholds, it's really no point. We've constantly tested, right? At the end of the day, if we didn't have a thesis, we would also feel like cuckoos, right, at the end of the day.
And looking at now new competition emerging, right? So in all fairness, you guys disrupted us to a certain extent. Now there are people like Oyo, you've got people like Paytm, Snapdeal, all of them talking about these segments. How do you potentially think about the threat emanating from them, especially given that you've got a Red Bus product, which did face a lot of heat from Paytm?
Yeah, look, I don't think, actually, if you look at it honestly, people thought so that we felt heat, right? And that's one great example that I have in my portfolio. A business which has hit thresholds, or what I call network effect thresholds, market share dominance. And, when a competition goes in and does very deep discounting, of course, there will be a little bit of nibbling. But, at those thresholds, it's just nibbling, right? And the other nice thing is that when that competition pulls back, if the audience move back, there's something wrong, right? So I think if you really look at these systems, right, these two-sided systems, it's not just about pricing and discounting, right? Pricing and discounting is an incentive you're creating to create the market, right? That becomes a little secondary, but it's really more about very, very deep experiences that you build for the supply and for the demand, and how do you build feedback loops between these two. And it's really hard to replicate, right? It's, on one hand, you have to work smart and intelligently, and on the other hand, you have to have a lot of energy to do so. And unfortunately, horizontals, where all can they put their energies, right? At the end of the day, they have like 200 categories, right? And I've played this game of playing multiple categories of businesses, burnt my fingers many times. So I think it'll be hard, right, basically, for anyone to build these deep experiences.
In terms of disruption within the model, where we're on the topic, Douglas mentioned that Asia is not only following a trend, they're actually creating new trends. And one of the examples we have in the region is in China, where players like, obviously, Ctrip, WeChat, Alitrip have created truly marketplaces, right? We mentioned Paytm in India, also a marketplace. How do you see this build up in travel? Do you see that a trend? Are you planning to disrupt this type of established player with new models around marketplaces?
Yeah, look, I think right now the very basic is still underutilized, right? Which is basic is the supply. There's still a lot of supply to come online. There's still a lot of demand to come online. You could have various nuances. My personal belief is internet is about disintermediation. And if internet has to become really valuable, you cannot engage with agents. unless you have a B2B channel. So that's my personal belief. This is if I look at an Ali trip kind of a model, specifically from an Indian context. So I think right now with the very basics need to be done right in the market. There's still huge opportunity. For example, we haven't even scratched the opportunity of outbound, right? So when somebody would think of go Ibibo, make my trip or Yatra to book a domestic hotel, but when the same guy wants to book a hotel in Bangkok, why should he not be thinking of our brand? So there's still huge amount of work to be done because Indians are pretty global and are traveling all across the world. So lots of work to be
Ashish,
done.
there's a question here from the audience.
Okay.
Hi, Ashish. Your thoughts on rate parity?
Yeah.
Should it be there? Should it not be there?
Yeah,
There's
so
a lot being spoken.
Yeah, so there are two parts of rate, right? So one is the pricing. I think the pricing should be set by the supply, and the pricing should be set by the supply based on the context. The context could be, what is the relationship the demand has with that hotel using our data. Location could be another thing. So that should be really set by supply, and there should be some bit of algorithmic influence. I don't think hotels should get hyper about only rate parity, that, everywhere the price should look the same. I think the nuance is really deep, and it still needs to be understood. I think the whole context of dynamic pricing based on the context of the buyer is still not understood. A lot of education still needs to be done on that front.
Ashish, we have another question over here.
Yeah. Hi, Ashish. This is Aditya from Hotelogics. My question is that for the last 4 times that I've been to London, 2 out of 4 bookings, I have got exactly the same. I've got kicked out, right? So it's not, number one, not a problem limited to India. And the question around it is that how do you ensure that with the small hotel, the Rajkumar hotel that we saw, having 20 marketplaces to sell to, how do you still ensure that that the guest is going to get the booking?
Yeah. First, glad you say that there's a problem to be solved in London. So hopefully, if we should solve that problem. Okay. Second is that I think typically a hotel, our view is that if there is one platform which delivers to him a critical mass of liquidity, you won't see this problem happening, because the pressure that the hotel would be in to deliver fulfillment, otherwise he'll lose his status on that marketplace, will be too much. The problem is that because the hotel is so fragmented into multiple platforms, that's why he does not value you as a guest. And that's really the challenge we've solved to quite an extent in India, right? I mean, we are now the most reliable platform, and we want to try and do that for the outbound also.
Another question further to the right.
Okay, I can take that offline maybe. Yeah.
Hi, Ashish. This is Bhanu from RateGain. So first of all, I think we all as consumers love you and all the e-commerce players, because we're having a big party out there, right, with all the discounts. So the first question is, when do you think this party is going to end for us? And when it does end, according to you, you mentioned something about a network effect. I also want to get a peek into your mind. How do you intend to utilize that network effect when you do reach that?
Yeah. So look, unlike product commerce, right, where the party is indeed a beautiful party, right, basically, because an iPhone, suddenly I get a cashback of $10,000, right? It's not just the units of the product, but it's also the costs being incurred to move that product from A to B, the warehousing costs, the fact that the things move from a primary warehouse to a secondary warehouse. So unlike that part, what is really interesting about the hotel's business is I think your party is going to continue. And it necessarily will not be funded by me. It will be funded by the hotels, because at the end of the day, what we are seeing, and I'm actually giving too much of secret sauce out, so some of my colleagues are going to kill me when I go back. What we are seeing is that the thresholds are getting crossed, right? So let's say if you're a hotel with 20 rooms, you were selling 5, and you were selling them for $3,000, right? Now if you start selling 15, you're happy selling them for $2,200. You may still price them at $3,000. Now, that $800 may have been funded by me, but it stops getting funded by me because your coverage has increased. And that's what we're beginning to see substantially. We actually, when we speak to consumers, they're actually now traveling and booking more because it's just selection is there, reliability is there. It's almost like, why are people doing more product commerce transactions? So that's really what we are seeing. So I don't think party is going to end, so be happy.
Maybe Ashish, one question on with intentions beyond India. Obviously, there's still a lot to do in India, to your point. On the other hand, you've really built, and not only you, but really the players in India, quite unique approach to mobile first development, to alternative accommodations. And obviously, in your case, you also have very interesting funding behind you by a group that is quite strong that trusted you to build a travel vertical. Do you see yourself or other Indian players be able to disrupt markets outside China using those unique capabilities?
Yeah, so first is that, we have been daring enough, and people again think I'm crazy. We've taken our bus business to 2 new markets, Malaysia and Singapore, and the intention is to go to more markets because we've seen unbelievably exciting traction, and the cost of that traction, we haven't needed to do discounting. We will do some bit of incentivization to build those network effects, reach those thresholds. So my sense is this, that right now we do have a play at India. I think my first thing would be to try and solve outbound. The problem that the gentleman had with London, I want to try and solve that. The problem which, we want to make it reliable, I think, and we want our brand to be thought of when people are booking outbound. So I think that's the first problem I want to solve. And then see whether I want to solve the demand side problem in other markets.
So is it easier, you believe, for a global player to try to do business in India or for a leading Indian player to break outside the home market?
Yeah, I think even we learn every day, right? Every day it's a learning by doing exercise, and for me, every day is a revelation. And the thing is that for me, India is almost like 20 countries rolled into one. I go to a market X, it's just totally different nuance, totally different supply behavior, totally different demand behavior. So I think for any player, whether it's global or a new domestic player, it's going to be hard, right? I mean, I'm not saying it's not achievable, but it's going to be pretty hard, essentially.
There are new services now, people are focusing on things like activities. Is that an area of interest for you? Do you see any one of your products branching into that?
Yeah, we're going to do some experiments. You'll see that shortly, but in a different manner. I don't think activities in a standalone set that, okay, hey, come and these are activities and just go and do skydiving or bungee jumping. I think in a context, but we'll still do experiments. And I think, again, the basics, flights, cars, accommodation, again, the basics, lots to be solved, right? I wish I had 48 hours in a day. But yeah, lots to be solved.
There we go. We need more time in the day. Ladies and gentlemen, Ashish, Sebastien, and Dhruv, please give them a round of applause.
Thanks,